everyone, professional photographer Ian Plant here. And today I am joined by a photographer who shares my personal mission in helping other photographers become the best photographers that they can be. He's a great guy and a great photographer. Nick Stover, welcome to PhotoMasters Live.
Hi, Ian. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, we're so glad to have you on. So tell us about Nick Stover, your origin story as a photographer, and try to do this in 2 minutes or less. I've got to put a time limit on it because there was one photographer that I interviewed and he was going on for like 30 minutes about how he got into photography. And after 30 minutes, I was trying to like gently interrupt him to
Yeah,
signal, hey, you got to speed this up. And then he went on for another 10 minutes. So 2 minutes or less.
two
How'd you
minutes. I
get into
got it. I'm in
photography?
it. So my photography journey, I've always been a huge outdoor guy, and taken tons and tons of images on really crappy cameras all over the place and never thought twice about it. So I went to Santorini, Greece in 2016 and just absolutely blown away by the beauty. And I went back and I looked at my pictures taken on a Canon PowerShot something for $300. And I thought, wow, these are not doing photography, the place, any service whatsoever. So made the decision then and there to get serious about my photography, and began the progression. And as I was joking with Ian earlier, learned how to shoot raw. And so a few months later, I found myself at Zion National Park, standing up at the canyon overlook for sunrise and just absolutely blown away in seeing the world now as a photographer. So that was the literal journey. The more figurative part of the creative journey was I was suffering from severe burnout as a reforming, I don't know how you want to think about it, CEO of a high growth solar startup, and was really looking to reconnect into deeper parts and places, and particularly within my soul and my connection to the natural environment, and found photography, as many of you do, that just absolutely beautiful medium to look both within myself and also find that recharge capabilities that nature provides us outwards. So 2020 made the decision to go professional, as in making my income off of it. And I don't think I'm looking back. So I think that was under 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think close enough. I wasn't actually timing you,
Good.
but
Okay.
I
Well,
did want to put some fear into you so that this
yeah,
didn't for 20
hey,
minutes.
I'm with you. So I'm good.
And this origin story is actually pretty common. I think virtually all of the professional photographers I know started doing something else other than photography. I know of one photographer, my good friend Joseph Rosbach, who actually has been a photographer his entire adult life. I think he graduated from high school. He had taken some photography courses. And right afterwards, he started working as a professional photographer doing assignment work. So he's the only one I know that actually has done this for a living the whole time. Pretty much
Yeah.
everyone else has come from somewhere else. You know, I used to be a lawyer, which no one can believe. And I think you probably get the same thing. I
Yeah.
bet that most people can't believe that you were once a CEO.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of crazy. I was running a $70 million business and just pulling my hair out because I was so unbearably stressed out all the time. So
Oh, okay. So that's what happened to the hair.
that's what
Sorry.
I'd like to say. I don't know how the grays kind of came through, but the hair. So
Well, tell us a little bit about your photography educational mission.
yeah. So let's see. Just got to keep. Obviously, it's interesting. I don't know what people would do without COVID to be able to talk about their professional aspirations before and after such a monumental thing. But mine definitely um, transferred a lot in the midst of COVID. So in the midst of COVID, um, I really recognized that of the camera clubs that are out there, there was a huge need to pivot into online presentations. And so I started reaching out to camera clubs all over the world. Actually, I gave a ton of presentations to clubs in the UK during COVID, all these domestic clubs, et cetera, which served as the basic foundation for what was to come, which was nature photography classes. Um, So later in the COVID year, the next year after, I guess it was 2021, I was in Montana for the summer, spending time backpacking in Yellowstone, Glacier, hiking around. And I really came up with the idea to bring forth the speaker series, but in particular with nature photography classes, how to establish a mission and what that mission might want to be. And that was to help nature photographers who are interested in deeper connections create more impactful images so they can confidently and consistently express themselves. So that's kind of a lengthy mission, but the big part of this is what are we really searching for when we're out there within the natural environment and as photographers? And I feel like that is connection. And we're looking for a deeper connection to the natural environment. We're looking for a deeper connection to ourselves as practicing artists and developing artists. We're looking for connection to other people, sharing that journey of where we've been, what we've seen, et cetera, et cetera. But what were the instances or what were we really encountering as the obstacles? Well, confidence and consistency. So how can we confidently go out and express what we're seeing? And how can we consistently bring those results back to show or convey what we're feeling out there? So that's kind of the personal mission I have with nature photography classes and what I've really tried to bring forth over a long period of time.
Yeah, and people can learn more about nature photography classes from Nick's website. So that's stoverphoto.com, and that will direct you to his educational website.
Yeah.
And definitely it's a great service. You know, I was part of one of the speaker series, had a lot of fun. It was a great way to connect with some new people. And Nick is a great guy. So there's lots to learn there. So
Yeah.
Nick,
And if I'm not a great guy, everything comes with 100% money back guarantee.
Yeah.
You know, it's saying, so if you don't like it, just ask for your money back anytime. No problem.
yeah, I hope you had your fingers crossed when you said that.
No, I still have people that, you know, attend a Guy Tall talk and they're upset about how abstract the conversation was with regard to things and they didn't see tips and tricks about photography. And I was like, well, yeah, that's not what Guy Tall does, but here's your money back. No problem.
Right. Did anyone ask for their money back from my talk?
No,
Good.
I can say that confidently. So.
Well, that was the right answer, whether it was truthful
Whether
or
it was
not.
right or wrong. Yeah, nobody knows.
Well, Nick, let's talk about your photography. And, you know, I like to ask this question of every photographer, mainly because people ask me this question and I never have a good answer. It's a very difficult question to answer. It's a trick question. So what is it about your photography that is different, that's unique? What is your personal style? What is Nick Stover trying to inject into each and every one of his photographs?
See, Ian didn't prep me with the questions ahead of time. I think what I'm still struggling to inject is within my portfolio, not necessarily my photographs, but within my portfolio as a whole, is to remove a little bit of the stigma of icon shaming that it can exist within the photographic journey. And I felt that one of the first times I went to Yellowstone, where I felt like I was going to be doing Yosemite. I mix those two up, even though I live in California. Yosemite. Ansel Adams went to Yosemite, and that's where the mountains, granites are. Where I was doing it a disservice, and I was not going to be able to capture anything that was uniquely me, and even being there. And so why even try? Or why even try to present some element of the iconic that was there? And maybe some element of it, it's not unique, so why shouldn't I even be showcasing it? So I'm still trying to, within my work, bring forth places that are iconic. So Ian's showing the picture here of Antarctica. Truly, absolutely incredible sceneries and situations. And so for me down there, well, I'm looking to represent the area. I'm looking to bring forth maybe a different perspective. In this particular image here, you know, I'm looking to follow that subconscious line from the iceberg all the way up to the first ridge, kind of across the ridge, weaving its way all the way back up through there. So I don't know if I've developed a signature per se. I'd like to think, and someday, you know, 50 years from now, that means I would be 96, which sounds like a good time to check out. There'd be unique ways or the dialogues with light. So I don't characterize myself as a particular genre photographer, much like Ian himself. as much as how am I reading to or how am I reacting to the light that I've been given. And so that light might direct me towards intimate scenes. That light might direct me out into the grand landscape. That might direct me to really photograph a true icon. Or in situations like this, it might direct me to photograph something that's truly unique. So this image is a perfect example. This is my number one, without a doubt, selling print that I sell at art fairs and online. And this one, it brings forth a lot of different emotion. There's a concept called prospect refuge theory, where we as humans that have evolved over time, in most cases, not all cases, some places I think we're still devolving, we want some element of safety and comfort in which to see the world. So we can feel like we're safe. So this is inside of a sea cave looking out over the California sunset. So you can feel safe, the prospect refuge, that you're not going to be attacked by your predators, and you can see out into your environment in such a way. You can have the comforts of water that's out there. Although it's salt water, we don't want to drink it. Water brings about a lot of calm within that scene or situations. So it's going to evoke a particular emotional feeling that people feel when they're seeing there. Two funny things about this image. One, I didn't even know it was a crescent moon on that particular night or the alignment until I took the picture. And I looked at my LCD and went, oh my God, I have a moon tonight. Wow, even better. And then two, over
I've
on
got
the
dust on my
side,
sensor.
there's a spider. Can't see it. But when you blow this thing up big, and I've sold this thing as a 48 by 96, which is a 4 foot by 8 foot print, that spider looks pretty big. And it's always a great engagement and discussion piece for people when they're looking at the image. And I can say, did you find the spider? And they can take a look. And oftentimes they can find it pretty quickly. So these are the kind of things that become unique representations. Not to mention, I had to get down to this one on a rope to be able to get myself down into this cave and be able to take this image. So when people ask for things that are unique, I would say this is about as unique as it gets.
Wow, I didn't realize that there was such a involved story behind this image. I just figured you kind of hiked around the headland and popped into the cave, but knowing that you had to rappel down on a rope, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, well, and when you read the San Luis Obispo headlines from time to time, I don't know, I'd say about once a month, there's always the Cal Fire got called out to evacuate somebody off of this cliff face area. And I'm thinking that was probably somebody that either had too much to drink or something else imbibed and then got stuck in this area without the rope to help them out. So,
Wow. Well, I wanted to ask you about this quote. You don't have to get it perfect, and most of the time you don't have to get it right. Just get it. What do you mean by that?
did I say that?
Yeah, I pulled it off your website.
Oh my, I need to relook at some of the things. So, wow, I can't believe I said something so profound that got put up on a screen for all people to see. The thing that we balance with as photographers, and I talked about this in a recent / upcoming podcast, is perfectionism. And balancing perfectionism versus what people will actually notice or a high level of standard of what we're trying to compare ourselves to on our own journey or where we might be. So I teach this a lot in my classes, is you shouldn't be comparing yourself to other people and where they might be on their photographic journeys or their creative journeys or anything else, as much as you're going to be comparing yourself to where you are on your own personal journey and also viewing your work that way. So I'll look at situations or instances with images that I can notice some small imperfection within that image, some area that maybe is not completely in focus the way I wanted, or some post-processing overstep I did, or whatever else. But the truth and the reality is 99% of the time, I'm the only one that notices that. And that 1% of the people that do notice that are missing the rest of the essence of the entire image of what you're trying to convey or bring forth. And so I really encourage, this isn't a license for sloppy work, but I really encourage people to just take a look at what they're trying to convey with their work and then think about that one thing that they're noticing. And is that right or wrong to be able to bring that forth? And most of the time we're going to say, you know what, it really doesn't matter because the essence of the whole scene is being communicated in such a way.
Yeah, and I suppose another way to think about this is that too often we get obsessed with technical perfection. And we forget that sometimes art is a little sloppy and can be a little fuzzy and ill-defined. And so, nature photography, in particular landscape photography, I think lends itself to this very precise way of doing things. We think of the classic near far landscape image where everything in the scene is completely sharply in focus. And so it's not a genre of photography that experiments with uh, sort of that fuzzier way of doing things, compared to street photography, for example, where a lot of times elements are blurred. There's large areas of the images in silhouette. It's just much more creative and expressive. And so maybe you're not giving people a license to be sloppy, but you might be giving them a license to be more expressive and creative with their photography, even if they're doing that rather static landscape style that we're all seemingly stuck in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's trying to define your intent, as well. And this probably goes a little bit beyond this particular thing, but it's defining our intent of the image. What are we looking to communicate? And then how does that potentially get confused or not confused by our focus within the image? And so oftentimes I think of what am I trying to content? What is my intent of this image that I'm trying to convey? Is it awe? Is it mystery? Is it magic? Is it wonder? Is it structural elements? Is it a particular emotion and what I'm trying to feel? And did I get that right more so than did I get some technical detail of F8 versus F16? And oh gosh, my ISO is a little bit too high versus too low. So, as you're mentioning, getting over those technical details that we need to understand, but we're not going to always get those right.
Yeah. And I definitely think there is a time and a place to put that technical stuff to the side. And we got a few comments that have come in. We've got a comment from Andrea who says she loves the quote. And sometimes just getting the image can be a great feeling of my experience at that time. And, I definitely think that's a large part of it is just being out there and enjoying yourself. That's the thing that a lot of people forget. I mean, I've got some clients who have kind of fallen on different sides of the spectrum here. I've had one client, for example, who is very obsessed with making great images and just being as good as she can be. And she feels like if she's not making good photos, then she should just give it up, which I think is counterproductive. Personally, I'm always saying, no, 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 no. If you're enjoying yourself, that's the key thing. I've got another client who really struggles with the technical perfection, but she just loves photography, just loves doing it. And I honestly think that if you're not loving what you're doing, then you maybe should be thinking about doing something else.
Yeah.
Because when that obsession with taking great photos, that obsession with perfection gets in the way of having fun, then I think you're on the wrong path. And we have another comment from Lou, basically saying it's sort of like F8 and be there. I guess that's, kind of like the old photojournalism expression.
Oh, it was the Galen Roll saying, I think. When people used to ask Galen Roll about all of his settings for the mountain environment, blah, blah, blah. I think he used to say F8 and be there, just specific to capturing it. But no, it's funny because I got behind me, I have a wide variety of images, some of which, this one over by the printer, and I can never point correctly on Zoom this way. That's a guy tall image over. I can't even point correctly at all. That one. It's a guy tall image. Well, the rest of them are mine. But the one of the Great Sand Dunes, which is way too dark, I could never sell it. I literally, not Great Sand Dunes, White Sands in New Mexico. I would have just as happily been out there on that particular day with no memory card or battery within my camera, running around the sand dunes in a windstorm with a crazy, crazy sunset in an area I'd never been to before in the white sands. And it was just like, just feeling alive with, the vibe of every bit about it. And 3/4 the images I took that night were absolutely garbage, but man, that experience in itself is going to be one I'll take with me forever. Just that aliveness out there.
We got a question from John. He wants to know what gear you're typically going out with.
So it varies. So some of the images you see behind me or on my website are backpacking images. And when I go backpacking, I just take a Nikon Z5 with a 28 to 200 lens. I think that's the setting, just the standard kit lens. And I don't even take a tripod or anything else. And I have a lot of portfolio images from that. When I'm going out for photography focused, while I'm taking 14 to 24, I'm usually taking a 24 to 105 and then a 100 to 400. This one here, South Georgia Island, this I'm pretty sure was wide angle. So I take 2 camera bodies, so I don't have to ever change out there within the field. So I can swap between cameras versus swap between bodies. So for example, on the Antarctica South Georgia trip, this one's from Bolivia here. This one I think would have been with probably that 100 to 400. This is a algae pool coming off of a big, huge, not even that big, but a big hot water upflow, like a geyser. That's the word I was looking for. The geysers in Bolivia and Chile, down in that particular area. So I focused less around having to switch out there within the field and much so more on having the proper lenses when I'm out there. In particular, I try to understand, am I going to want the wide angle more, or am I going to want the more of the medium range? And then I'll dictate down from there. This one is a backpacking image. This is from the Kings Canyon National Park, coming down after one of the hardest days of hiking I never had. I was literally at my wit's end. And then I got the incredible light show coming up of this particular area all the way through. So this is a panorama. So I take the images as verticals, 5 verticals side to side, just stitched together, a big enough panorama down there within the scene and the situation. Taken with a Z5 with the 24 to 200 kit lens. To be able to take it, and it's plenty sharp to print as large as I want, has the full dynamic range I want within my image all the way through. One of the other things on kit, which I encourage people to do, is you can run a simple filter in Lightroom to tell you your focal length after a particular thing. So for Antarctica, I was like, what was my focal length? What was I shooting at the majority of the time? What lenses did I use, etc.? And my 100 to 400 lens took 92% of my pictures when I was in Antarctica, just indicating the massiveness of the scene and what I was looking to capture. So that helps me, A, to advise people when they ask about what lenses to take to particular locations. B, for me to understand if I'm going into another situation similar to Antarctica, what is going to be my preferred lens of choice most likely. So I'm set up in such a way to be able to take those kind of things all the way through.
We've got a question that relates to this image. What do you use to stitch your photos together for panoramas?
I use Lightroom. So I find Lightroom's photo stitching to do majority of the work I need. I've stitched together night sky images absolutely flawlessly with Lightroom. And I just find the panorama merge functionality really, really good. Occasionally, I've had to do PT GUI, but I haven't done PT GUI in so long. I don't even have it on this computer. And I've had this computer for 1.5 years. So that gives you an indication of how often I use it. So Lightroom does the magic for me.
Yeah, that merge to panorama works really nicely, and it's super easy to use. Just select a bunch of images and right click, go to merge to panorama, and boom, puts it together almost flawlessly. We've got a bit of a trick question from Felix. I actually love this question. He asks you whether you ever have technical failures, whether you fail to achieve technical perfection. And if so, what percentage of the time does this happen?
That's a loaded question. So it's hilarious. I am a professional. I can say that and say it with a straight face in terms of what I teach, how I teach, why I teach in particular too, not just that and then what I'm able to do. Do I have lots of lessons learned and progress? Absolutely, without a doubt. But I swear to you, some days when I go out, it's like I'm starting over from scratch. So maybe I haven't photographed in a month or so, and I'll get out into a particular scene or location. I haven't traveled for a bit or something. And it's like I exposure triangle. What is this? What does this represent as well? And so I will find myself when I get out into a scene where I haven't photographed in a while, I will start taking photos well before I know I need to take photos to kind of clear some of the rust out. But I can say without a doubt, without fail, every single time I go out on a big photography trip, I will come back with at least one image, most likely a higher percentage of images that are out of focus. And how does that even happen? Well, I'm shooting a scene, I can't get into autofocus, and I switch over into manual focus, and then forget I switched over into manual focus, and then go back out into the scene or situation again, not forgetting, remembering I'm in manual focus and think I'm in autofocus and things aren't focusing all the way through, etc. So that's one of the reasons that things can happen from time to time. The other reason that sometimes happens is I'll change my focus points within a scene. So like I could go from multiple points to single point focus and not be shifting that all the way down through the image. So focus is probably the number one thing that I've noticed from time to time with images. Most of the time, I don't do a prolonged period of time. One of the best practices I've had is to try to do some stop in the middle LCD reviews. So pull it up on the back of the histogram, back of the LCD, and zoom in a little bit and make sure that I'm kind of getting things in focus or not. I have had one instance where I bought a lens used, and this is the only time it's happened, and the lens did not focus properly on one of the cameras I had. And so I didn't do any test shoots, and I went out for a whole evening of shooting and came back and nothing was in focus on that particular camera and lens. Luckily it was close by and I was able to go back out and shoot again another day. But so I'd say the majority of my technical issues are related to focus.
Yeah. And I think, certainly if you're doing wildlife photography, you're more likely to have technical failures because the autofocus might not lock on. When you're doing landscape photography, I think because it's a little bit more slow and deliberate, it's easier to avoid those obvious technical problems. But I think the challenge with landscape photography is when you're trying to do something like focus stacking or exposure blending or doing a panorama stitch. Sometimes the images don't come together quite right, or sometimes you just can't get an exposure blend to work just right. Those seem to be the more common types of technical challenges that we face. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. So I can tell you almost every single time I've shot drone panoramas, and I've shot a fair number, I always wish I'd shot more of the panorama. And let me preface this. So drones, people think, oh yeah, wow, I could actually shoot panoramas, and you can shoot massive panoramas with drones. So I have big prints taken on what is basically a flying GoPro in the first generation Mavic. I mean, it was a 2.8 fixed aperture camera, and these things are printed 4 feet by 8 feet and look fantastic, but it might be 24, 28 panorama images stitched together. But every single time I've taken drone panoramas, I always wish I'd taken more. I wish I'd taken more up. Should have taken a little more to the side. I wish I'd taken more down, all the way through there. The new Mavic Pro has a panorama function where you can put it in a panorama mode and it'll shoot, and it won't stitch, but it'll shoot all the images you need so you don't have an issue. So I've had images I captured that were absolutely stunning, and somehow I swung the camera too far in a particular shot and I ended up with a gap in the middle of my panorama. So the image became unuseful. So that's the other thing of, whoa, wish I'd done that before, or wish I'd done that after. But it's like I tell people, I have a license now to go back to some of these places and try again, because I got it so wrong the first time.
Well, it's good to have an excuse to go back. But, these challenges that we're talking about, I think speak to the complexity of photography with advancements in computer processing and processing software. People are continuing to push the creative envelope by doing all of these things that 10 or 15 or 20 years ago would have been very difficult to do. And so when I look at your images, I don't really feel like I'm seeing, though, a lot of that sort of thing going on. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at these photos thinking that you're actually doing very little processing, maybe some focus stacking, maybe some exposure blending, but you're really not leaning too heavily into the software part of the equation.
You would have to look again at what I sent you. I don't think I sent you, I think every image I sent you was a single image exposure. I don't think I sent you any focus stacked. I don't think I sent you any exposure blends. Single image. Yeah, single image exposure. The other one, single image exposure of this is in Joshua Tree in the Cholla cactus forest at sunrise when they just completely light up and go live, and absolutely beautiful. And you could critique this one. I mean, I've critiqued this one and said, well, it's a little bit more blue than probably was there within the sky for sunrise, but also I'm trying to work with a little bit of how we see blue versus orange and those opposites and complementary colors in terms of how we interact with the scene or situation all the way through there. But yeah, f/16 wide angle lens seems to do a lot of mastery sometimes within your images to make things feel in focus.
Well, let's talk about the blue sky in that image, because I personally find that rendering blue skies is the most difficult technical challenge when you're doing any sort of outdoor photography where you have that sky involved. And I think it's especially difficult when you've got that color contrast. When you're shooting at sunrise or sunset, you've got these colorful clouds, and then you've got that blue sky. And so where I've landed on the blue sky, because for years I was trying to make it darker. I was trying to boost the saturation, trying to bring in that complementary color scheme. But in recent years, where I've landed is the opposite. So instead of trying to darken that blue sky, I like to let it stay kind of bright relative to the rest of the sky. And I end up desaturating the blues, so that basically I'm just de-emphasizing the blues so that people are looking at them less. And instead, I am increasing the saturation of the areas of the sky that have got that beautiful sunrise or sunset colors. So you're kind of where I was maybe 5 or 6 years ago with those blue skies. But personally, I just find it frustrating. Like, it seems to me that a camera sensor can never capture a blue sky the way a blue sky looks to our eyes.
No.
And it looks weird when you don't get it 100% right, because the blue sky is very familiar to all of us. I mean, we see the blue sky, maybe not every day, but enough times in our lifetime that we know exactly what a blue sky should look like. And when you see a photo and the blue sky doesn't look exactly like that ingrained memory, it creates this uncanny valley, basically, where you have this, whoa, that's not right reaction.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I balance in some of my images is, and this one in particular, I sell this as a print. And so when I'm selling some of my artwork as prints, so it's going to be, and this could be, probably part of my process that can incorporate it in the future. This is going to print on the metal, and that blue sky is going to lose a lot of its vibrancy and saturation in second it prints. So I'm processing primarily to sell this image as a print. And then secondarily, obviously, to share it with other people and other experiences. So part and piece is I want it to feel very alive, realistic, but alive when people are out. When they look at this image, they feel like they're part of that. They can feel some of that warmth that you would feel in a desert sunrise type of environment out there within that situation. So yeah, I definitely do not oversaturate my blues, and they can become saturated to like this level pretty quickly if you're not aware of them. So
yeah, and it's that transition zone from the blue sky to that band of yellow when you've got the sunset or sunrise going on. So you actually get that green, that transition zone where the blue sky goes green, and that's just the worst.
Yep.
And so you said this is a single image, and it looks like the moon is pretty sharp in focus, which would imply that the tree was very, very far away. But I'm guessing if you zoom in and look at this image file at 100%, the moon is a little bit soft and the focus is on the tree. Is that right?
It is. The moon is a little soft, but it's also exceptionally hard to get the right kind of focus behind the tree. And also, as many of us know, when we're trying to shoot the moon as it's rising, we're shooting through so much atmosphere. This is taken here on the Central Coast. So I'm shooting through a marine layer that's coming in. I'm shooting through, in this particular case, I'm shooting kind of out over the Carrizo Plains, which is very dry area out in that regard. And this goes back to, the quote, which I said, which I've already forgotten, but basically a balancing perfection all the way through, because you're going to have some trade-offs in this particular scene or situation to get, if you're going to want to do it as single image. So I would love have some light on the hills to be able to show some of the things that's there. But my essence of what I'm trying to bring forth is the silhouette of the tree itself and that mastery back there, or that magic, I should say, back behind there with that rising moon that's coming up behind. So this was an interesting example, or an interesting time of photographing, using photo pills to plan this shootout, shooting this scene and realizing there's a lot of things I didn't realize ahead of time, but I needed to be able to react. So one of which was how fast the moon moves when you're looking through a telephoto lens. I think for any of us that have photographed the moon or the eclipse, or they're going to photograph the eclipse this year, you're going to be shocked at how quickly, when you're looking at something through 600 millimeters or more, it moves within your frame. So this scene, this was a very short period of time, and I couldn't predict what exposure I wanted. So I'm bracketing. I'm doing 7 shots bracketed. And so it's shooting 7 shots back to back to back. And then maybe I need to reframe the composition or see the thing. So there's a ton of images. But what also happened on this night, which was really interesting, is I started up on a hill. And as the moon got higher, I was able to drop down the hill and go down into the basin. And I extended my shooting time by about another 15 minutes, because as I was getting lower and the moon was getting higher, the same plane of sight through the tree was staying exactly the same. So I was able to extend it all the way through and get some different images, some of which I liked a lot, some of which I didn't like at all, but at least I was able to kind of prolong the experience and be out there, versus if I'd been on a flat piece of ground shooting at a flat tree, as soon as that moon got just a little bit higher, the image would have been completely done. But I was in a ravine, which allowed me to go down and continue to photograph all the way through.
Yeah, and I think, just to be clear, this is an image that probably would have been impossible to get that technical perfection where both the tree and the moon are in focus. Because unless the tree was many, many miles away, there would have been a focus difference between the tree in the foreground and then the moon at infinity in the background. And with a long lens, you just can't stop down enough to get enough depth of field to cover everything from the tree to the moon. And I think focus stacking would have been pretty much impossible for this sort of scene. Like if the moon was above the tree, you could have focus stacked. But
Yeah.
with the moon right behind the tree and the moon moving very quickly, I just don't think it would have been something that would have been possible. So, focusing on the tree was, obviously the right choice. And that's really where the eye goes to. And that's really the intent of this image. So I think it worked out just perfectly. So here's another quote from you, Nick. No photo program can change a bad shot. What do you
Yeah.
think of this?
So, post-processing is a crucial part of our photographic journey in terms of how we're expressing ourselves, our images, making them feel realistic and believable, etc. But I invariably get questions from time to time from people about, well, can I just add a plugin on this or do this or that? Or what about AI? And you can do things with AI that will help to salvage an image. So the moon image, for example, in the past one, I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, I ran Topaz Denoise on that one to cut out the shadow noise I had, because there was just no detail in the darkness that was there. So what I'm doing is reducing the noise in the image to improve the sharpness and printability of the image. But I couldn't have used any sort of program to change a composition. I couldn't have used any sort of a program to change an improperly captured shot if I'd blown out the sun, or blown out the moon, or photographed the scene just way too dark all the way through there. And so I think that's the key element where we got to get it right in field, and we can use these tools we have to slightly modify our final presentation of the image, but we can't think we can get it completely wrong in capture, completely wrong with how we envision the scene, and then we can magically fix that in post-processing later as part of what we're doing.
We got a question from Brian. He wants to know, in terms of prints, what you are selling these days. Are you mostly selling metal, or are customers still requesting traditional prints?
Mostly metal. So I sell, I'd say 90% of the prints that are 16 by 20 or larger are metal. I sell a lot of cards. and I sell a lot of folios, which are traditional prints, because those fit into frames pretty easily. Cards can be very easily circulated or kept as mementos or whatever else. So the art fairs, I sell a lot of cards and folios. And I don't want to digress a lot. I'm teaching a printing class actually next Monday, if you want to join, to talk a lot about this. But the reason I do want to digress real quick is cards and folios are incredible ways to get feedback from people on what they're gravitating towards and liking without spending money on bigger prints. And so when people ask, well, how do I want to start selling my work in galleries, or how do I pick my prints, et cetera? I'm like, well, find some place that you can start selling some cards, some greeting cards, that you can start to get feedback on what people are gravitating towards. So I've had prints that sell like gangbusters that I dismissed, that I didn't think were good at all. But as I was restocking cards at one of the local galleries, that card kept selling out time and time and time again. And so I was like, well, obviously there's interest within this image. So then I started printing it larger and larger and larger. And now I sell that print quite regularly. So anyway, so 90% of my prints are metal, and then about 10% I sell on traditional canvas. So canvas still fits some of the modes or the mediums that people want to see.
So how much does weather, how important is weather? I feel like this is a trick question. I realized halfway through the question that it's a trick question, because I think every landscape photographer would say, yes, weather is super important. So, you mentioned earlier that a lot of your photography is reacting to light. And so, looking at a photograph like this, I get the impression that you're often just reacting to the weather conditions, the light, the magic of the moment. Would you characterize your photography as being mostly reactive, or do you do a fair amount of planning when you're thinking about making landscape images?
Yeah, so the moon image with the tree is a 100% planned image, obviously, and that didn't just come by chance. But that is kind of the exception versus the rule. Mine is a lot more about reacting, but reaction will be putting myself in a position to be able to optimize the capture. And what I'm talking about with that is understanding where the light is, i.e. the sun, and then moving in that direction. Actually, you go back to the other image real quick. Sorry. Oh, there it goes back. So this is Chiricahua National Monument in Arizona. And this was one where I decided to do a hike toward the end of the day down into the canyon. And it was a loop hike. And you have two options of the loop. For those of you that don't know how loop hikes work, you can go one way or the other. And this one, it was like, okay, which way do we want to go? Do we want to go clockwise or counterclockwise? And so just simply looking at the sun and understanding the trajectory of where the sun was going to go dictated the direction in which we hiked this. So this one was like, okay, the sun is going to be setting straight down that valley, and we're not going to want to be walking up that valley with the sun at our back. We're going to want to be walking when we're getting side light potentially coming into the scene. And that's all I had in this scene was side light coming in, which is going to be the most dimensional light we can work with. So that side light is going to bring about a lot of dimension there within that situation versus, you can go to the next one now. A scene like this one is 100% reacting. This one was not even in any way, shape, or form. This was actually taken with Josh Tripp standing directly next to me. It was on a backpacking trip up in the High Sierra. This is a place called Gardner Basin. Complete and total reaction to the environment, but putting ourselves in that position to be able to respond and then making choices. Okay, I'm going to get down lower to amplify the reflection. I'm going to wait till a little bit later in the day, and I'm going to get lucky in getting some high clouds within there. But I'm also going to frame the bottom of the image a little bit to be able to get a little bit of compositional elements there. And then frame the reflection in such a way, well, how do I want it to proportionalize? Do I want more to be the water, or do I want more to be the sky? So putting a little bit of thought process together into how do we actually create the image also helps quite a bit within there.
It seems like you've done a lot of work in high mountain areas. So definitely a lot of backpacking.
Yeah, for
And
a guy that lives in the central elevation 160 feet in California, you'd be like, what? Why? So, yeah.
yeah, well, I feel
So,
like
yeah, but go ahead. Sorry.
I feel like my backpacking days are a little bit behind me, but I'm hoping to get back out there and maybe explore some wilderness areas in the next few
Well,
years.
go back to that one because it's a couple funny points about it. No, the Nepal one.
This one, yeah.
iPhone. Swear to God, iPhone.
Well, I mean, don't get me started on iPhone photography. My good friend and colleague Rick Salmon has fully embraced iPhone photography to the point where he's no longer bringing his regular camera. He's just doing iPhone photography. He's doing some amazing stuff with it. And whenever I talk with him, he's always like, "Hey, so have you switched over to your iPhone yet?" And
Yeah.
my answer is no, not yet. I'm not quite there, but I do feel like it's coming. It's just around the corner. It's not going to be very long before
Yeah.
all of us have ditched our heavy cameras and we're just completely shooting with our iPhones.
Well, I have a heavy camera on my back, and I got up at like this was in Nepal. It snowed the night we were there. I'm in this cold, just I'm in this tea house, and there's no heat in the tea house, and it's like 25 degrees when I wake up at 3:30 in the morning to hike back up this valley. It snowed. Like I get out of the warm sleeping bag. It was like, oh God, why am I doing this? I get all the way up there, and this is just this beautiful valley. I take a bunch of pictures with both of my cameras, a wide variety of things, scenes I like, etc. And then this one was just literally like I liked the composition. I think I'd taken one with the camera, and I took one with the iPhone so I could show my wife and other people when I got back to the tea house what that morning was like. And this ended up being my favorite picture from the whole day. Just cut. I think it was the focal length was perfect, and the framing was even better than I got on my regular camera, kind of all the way through. So, yeah, iPhone. I think I took it as a RAW on the iPhone at least, so I could post process it.
Well, that's perfect. You just answered Greg's question. He was wondering if you're shooting raw with your iPhone.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's I really think the technology is just around the corner. I mean, it's gotten to the point where the phone images look fantastic, and there's more and more creative options. I mean, it doesn't give you the full suite of creative options that you'll have with a mirrorless camera or a DSLR, but it's getting there, and it's only a
yeah,
matter of time.
yeah. But
So
that image, real quick, on that one that you were just on too. This is an example of an image that you couldn't create with an iPhone. This is I can't get the Sunstar with an iPhone like I can with a wide angle lens, and I can't get the dynamic range. This image, to
yeah,
properly expose it, was a dark raw file because I had that bright line leading right back up to the Sunstar, which I had to protect my highlights on, and then I'm shooting directly into the sun, close to sunset. So I'm trying to protect as much of that sun as I can. And so my histogram was smashed to the left, so dark. And then as I post process, open up the shadows, bring up the blacks, work with the tone curve a little bit, then I get the detail and the dynamicism back within that image. And so this is an image where, I couldn't have conveyed the just beauty of the sea arch or anything else with anything other than the technical equipment I needed and I had on that particular day. So
yeah, and you can't get the Sunstar with the phone because you need a variable aperture. If
yeah,
you're shooting wide open, you just don't get the sunburst effect, or it doesn't look very good.
yeah,
And I'm just going to take a moment briefly to give a shout out to our sponsors, Tamron. They make high quality lenses for a variety of camera platforms. Delkin Devices, they make reliable media cards, breakthrough filters. They make really great filters. Platypod, a small portable camera base for ground level shooting. And SlickPick, a great service for displaying your photos online. And so we've got a few minutes. I want to just pause on this quote from your website for a moment. It is my belief that we choose the craft of photography to deepen our connection to ourselves, others, or the natural environment. So tell us a little bit more about this.
yeah. So this is, I think I could change or to and the natural environment. So this image actually corresponds well. So this is Greenland, a 8-day backpacking trip through some of the harshest terrain I've encountered anywhere. No trails whatsoever, and you're just trogging through bogs and mud and everything else, but that connection that we as photographers or nature photographers in particular to particular landscapes is just completely so deep. And so for me, why I choose to backpack so often and spend so much time in the mountains and other areas is that just calming of my body, the calming of my mind, calming of myself, and just being completely present with what's in front of me in this natural environment. And so as I'm out there within that environment and I'm using the chosen medium of photography, well, I'm getting that opportunity or the option as a photographer to share that with other people, to share that experience and to deepen my opinion and my connection to myself, because I feel so much more peace and I feel so much more calm when I'm out in these environments. And every single time I then look at an image like this one, I took this image 7 years ago and it still just evokes, I get this flood of emotion coming back on how special of a day and how special of a place that was for me. So I consider us the very fortunate few that we have this excuse, and I use excuse in air quotes, of our camera to get out there within the natural environment and allow ourselves the opportunity to experience things like this.
Yeah, it's funny. I think you and I picked up a camera basically the same way. It was kind of by accident. Someone put a camera in our hands and we just thought it would be a nice way to enjoy the natural environment, to extend our enjoyment of it. But for me, I know that very quickly the photography took over. I got
Yeah.
hooked. And so instead of bringing a camera along with me when I went hiking, I was hiking to do photography. And I think in many ways, it kind of ruined my enjoyment of backpacking and hiking and canoeing and all that stuff. Because I used to love doing that stuff just for the sake of doing it. And now I only do it to do photography. So
Yeah.
in some ways, I feel like the photography has gotten in the middle of my enjoyment of the natural world, but it also allows me to enjoy the natural world on a level that's completely different from anything that I've been able to do before. And so these last few images, I just want to run through them kind of quickly because
Oh, this one's focus stacked.
yeah.
That one's focused. That one's an 8 image focus stack. The first one for sure. Sorry. So I did lie. That was one it was.
Well, these are probably my favorites of the images that you sent me. And I think the reason why I like these so much is that you're getting really playful with the geometric forms here. The shapes are all working together quite nicely in these images. So these are much more abstract studies than some of your other work. And so, for example, this, just a bunch of triangles coming in from all different directions. And then this photo, the sweeping curves and lines in the foreground mirrored the lines created by the sun rays in the sky. And then, of course, you've got all these swirls, all of these vortices coming together in this image. And I think these three photos are just wonderful. So tell us a little bit more about each of these.
So this one was in Canadian Rockies. And I was actually super dismayed. It rained the day before. We were up there photographing ice bubbles. We thought we were done for. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden, one of the areas that had formed a pool, and we're standing on top of 10 feet of solid ice, so we're not worried about falling through, started to reform as it got even colder. And we had these ice crystals that were forming. And the camera is literally set on top of the ice. The camera lens is fractions of an inch away from that first kind of ice crystal that was forming. So if you look closely at this image, it's actually not in focus at the front part, but the lines are so strong in how they pull you into the image that your eye just skips right over the top of the lower part that's not in focus and goes into the image as a whole. So truly, incredible experience laying on my belly on the ice with my camera laying flat on the ice to be able to capture this image and focus stack it all the way through.
Yeah, we had a question as to whether this was Abraham Lake, but I don't think it is. It's that other lake
Wow,
that
it's Lake
starts with an M.
Minnewanka.
Yeah, Minnewanka, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I recognize that wall of mountain on the right. That's kind of like unmistakable if you've been there.
Yeah.
And this photo is just this must have been one of those moments where you saw this happening and you were scrambling to find a composition that would work with those sun rays.
Do you want the honest truth? I was
No, I want you
photographing
to
a totally different composition for sunset over on this other side of the dune. And then I walked around after I'd broken down for the night and saw this composition and freaked out and popped the tripod out. And then I got the anti-crepuscular rays coming up on the other side. So just absolutely lost it. This one's called the Sand Wave. The interesting distinction about all three of those images is all three of those images I have in color and black and white, and they've all sold in color and black and white. So when you get these really dynamic compositions and put in place like this image, this is a foxtail pine in the High Sierra. And these are old pine branches that have fallen off, and the tree had continued to grow around the denser branches that are coming out and created these contortions and these looks. And so it's not a bristlecone, it's a foxtail pine. Same thing, printed in black and white. It's actually printed right behind my head in black and white. Still sells and connects with an audience, or still connects with an audience in color and black and white, kind of all the way through. So when you find these uniform images at times, they can look great in either medium all the way through.
Yeah, I think all three of them are absolutely beautiful. We don't have much time left, but I thought I would give you an opportunity to talk about the Inspired Creator. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, so we set aside from the Inception Nature Photography classes 10% of the net proceeds, or I should say proceeds from all of the classes and courses, to go into an Inspired Creator Fund. And so far we funded over $25,000 worth of projects. Things like this new podcast coming out called Pixels. We funded individual creative projects. We're funding a book coming up on Oregon rivers. We're going to be funding the new announcements, which I can't announce yet, but I've started to notify people there. So it's an opportunity to give back to the community as a whole related to projects or concepts they have about their inspiration within nature. So it's been hugely influential for me to interact with these people to help them bring ideas or projects to light. And we're going to continue to do so going forward. So that's the Inspired Creator as part of the nature photography classes subset.
Well, thank you, Nick. That's all we have time for, unfortunately, but this has been a great conversation. Thank you for sharing your images, your insights, and your stories. I know everyone had a great time, and I'm hoping we can connect again. So thank you very much for joining us.
All right. I'm going to be looking for you in the Norway airport as I'm coming in, you're going out, but we'll keep an eye out for you. But my pleasure to be here. And certainly anyone has questions, comments, or whatever else, Nick, N-I-C @stoverphoto.com. Drop me an email. I'm usually very responsive and happy to hear from people. Even Ian.
Well, thank you, Nick, and thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.